A man came to town today. A very strange man. He looked to be in his 30s, walking with a hunchback and a load of items upon it. He had thinning red hair and tannish skin, as well as an almost skeleton-like frame. He was quite small, really, but it was the big grin on his face that got to me. It was such a large smile, almost inhumanly big. Its edges seemed to stretch beyond his cheekbones and into his eyes. He strolled into town with that joyful expression on his face, speaking in almost whispers to children who were lined along the road. The children would stare, almost emotionless, as he whispered to them. I couldn't make out what he was saying from the distance, so I sat on the centerpiece of town square, waiting for him to cross my path. I was genuinely terrified, to be honest, but I don't know why. Yet, even still, I waited for him. I couldn't explain this curiosity, but it had a hold on me that would not be released until I spoke to the eerie man. He began approaching me. The soft thudding of his footsteps was barely audible over the dull roar in the square. Yet, all the same, I could hear it plainly as anything else when I waited in a slight panic for him to reach me. He stopped in front of me, still not facing me. I looked up to catch his face. He stared forward and then slowly turned towards me. He never opened his eyes. The smile never disappeared from his face. Turning his head to me, he opened one eye and stared directly at me. I slumped down. An incredible fear that I had never felt hit me like a wave. He didn't say a word. He only stared into my eyes with that hawk eye he had open. I completely lost track of reality. The sounds of the town square around me faded away, and I became immersed in the eerie silence that seemed deafening. I went to run away, but I couldn't. Nothing would move. My body seemed frozen to the bricks I was sitting on. The smile, it felt like it was looking at me, almost like there was the true man behind it, but not the eyes. I can't explain it, but to put it the best way I can, the smile seemed ageless, eternal. It echoed in my mind infinitely. My body began leaning away from him. Slowly his head turned to face the road, and he began to go on his way again. I was shaking nervously, and I felt like I could throw up. As I walked off, I realized there were masks on his back. He must have been a mask collector of some sort. That night, I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was the meeting with him in the square. He didn't say anything, but I felt as if he completely disemboweled me with his glance, his piercing eye. I didn't know what it was, but the man was not human. No, he was something else, something very sinister. That ageless feeling wouldn't go away either, as if he was some sort of ancient demon wandering the earth from city to city, town to town. Why though? I want to know more. I was becoming obsessed with the very thing that terrified me more than anything else. Tomorrow, I'll search for him and see if he was in town. I had honestly hoped he had left, yet if he hadn't, I could learn more about him. The next day, I ate breakfast and ran to the square. I saw a small group of people gathered around a small vacant building in the corner. I ran over to see him. The demon. He had his hands together and was speaking about how he was opening his Happy Mask shop here in the square. He preached and preached, "Come one, come all," to the crowd. They all seemed memorized by his words. Finally, he finished and headed inside the tiny building. A small sign next to it read, "Happy Mask Shop. Happiness is just a mask away." I shuddered. What was so scary about this man? I had to know more, so I ran inside. There was already a few people in there, yet it was silent. No one was talking. What's going on? Were they negotiating something? I saw a man, a child next to him, and a woman behind him, yet none of them were saying anything. They were only staring at the Happy Mask Man. He nodded his head as if they had reached some silent agreement and handed 2 masks to the man and child. They turned and walked out. As they passed, I saw a dazed look in their eyes, as if they were completely out of it. The woman was out just behind them, carrying another mask. Then it was me. I was all alone with him. He cocked his head, maintaining his silence. He wanted me to speak, so I did, asking him about his shop, as well as where he came from. Silence. He didn't say anything. He just kept grinning. I was beginning to become irritated, yet simultaneously more frightened too. I stepped back towards the door, asking him to answer me. Just then, a child walked in. It was a boy, not over 5 years old. He walked up to the Happy Mask Man. The man stood there, hunched over to the boy. The boy held out his hand, expecting a mask perhaps. The Happy Mask Man opened his eyes, both of them, and stared the most evil glare I had ever seen at the child. I had stepped back again, almost tripping as I reached for the doorknob. I shook in terror. The man grabbed the boy by the neck and picked him up off the ground. I could hear horrific screeches of terror coming from the boy's throat. He was at least 8 feet off the ground. Just then, the salesman's mouth began opening, still smiling, of course. It grew wider and wider until it was at least a foot wide. I could hear his jaw snapping as it opened. Horrible, inhumane sounds began coming from him as he raised the child higher. Then, all of a sudden, the child was halfway down the salesman's throat. I screamed as I could see the boy's legs kicking in the salesman's mouth. Slowly but surely, they slid down and disappeared. The boy was gone. I remember crying hysterically, yet I couldn't move. He turned to me. His mouth was still hanging wide open. He then put his hands to his face. A strange glow began to appear around his hands. Slowly he peeled his hands away from his face. A repulsive stretching sound could be heard as his skin appeared to be getting pulled off. He arched his back farther and farther until his hands were separated from his face by a clump of flesh at least 2 feet long. This man... No, this thing was an absolute monster. His flesh tore off, leaving the same grinning face. He stood there with a mass of skin in his hands. Slowly the skin began molding and contorting. I backed into the corner. What the heck is going on? Before I knew it, the skin had turned into a small shape in his hands. He held his hand out, showing me his new prize. It was the child's face. He made a mask out of the flesh. The horror hit me, and I began vomiting into my lap. I heard a small chuckle from the salesman. No. I had to get out of here. I got up and ran to the door. Upon grabbing the doorknob, I heard one more thing. Do you want the mask, my boy? Tears were streaming down my cheeks as I was sobbing and running across the town square. I could hear the people gasping and shrieking as I ran by. I'm sure it was a poor sight. A child covered in blood and vomit. I didn't care though. That thing was a demon. I ran into my house, ran straight to my room. Both my parents were out. I sat there for what must have been hours, rocking back and forth, covered in filth. Finally, I got up, looked out the window. The small building was still there, but no one was going into it. And the sign was gone. To this day, I have no idea what happened or what I experienced. I had never told anyone because I know no one would believe me. I washed myself and tried to continue my life as normal after that. The Happy Mask Salesman was gone. I even asked around town, and people all claimed they either had no idea what I was talking about or they weren't sure. Dead ends were everywhere. Had it been a dream? No, I wouldn't make something up like that, and I pity those who may experience him in the future. That monster, that thing. May the gods protect whoever comes into his path. It's been a few years now, but he's never come back, and I dread the day more than anything when he may. If he does, I'll be sure to stay clear. If you see a man in your hometown claiming to sell masks, a man who looks off and seems to be hiding something sinister, stay away from him. He isn't human. Whatever it is the very essence of evil itself. I think the biggest thing about these stories is the build-up. This story had an amazing build-up. Everything that built up to it was definitely worth it. I love the small details that they threw in there. It really did add to the story. Like, he couldn't get the Happy Mask Salesman out of his mind. He was so curious about him that he wanted to go back to the store and see what was this Happy Mask Salesman about. I thought that was really cool. The climax of the story was the most creepiest part. When you guys were hearing me read it, it was my first time reading it, and I actually had to stop. Because I was getting goosebumps. It was really freaky. I love the imagery that the writer did. That was amazing. Rarely do I read creepypastas, but my goodness, this was freaking terrifying. It's been a while since I've read something that engaging, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this spooky reading video. If you did, hit the like button as it helps this video out. Also, consider subscribing as I'll be doing more Zelda related content, maybe like this. If you guys want more of it, I wouldn't mind doing it. But yeah, I'll be doing more Zelda related content in the future. But thanks for watching, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Happy Halloween. Ooh. Ooh.